all the different angles to that. There we go.
I don't know what that means, but it sounds cold.
Perfect. For Loco. Loco. Let's go.
Someone jumped on the train early on that one. I love it.
Yeah, I
So
love
much energy.
that. It was definitely ready to go in the chat there. And who's up? We've got the 5 p.m.ers, JW.
5
Oh,
p.m.
yeah.
somewhere.
That's amazing.
I get it.
Perfect. And the missionaries. All right. Perfect. Let's see. Yeah, the missionaries. Let's go. You are on a mission. All right. Thank you so much. Keep that energy going. Going to hand it right back over to Lenny to get started.
Amazing. I had no idea this was going to be part of this course, by the way, so this entertains me highly. Okay, so before we dive in, I'd love to just kind of ask y'all in the chat, just share what's one takeaway from the last workshop or the homework that you did or the squad that's kind of stuck with you that you want to hold on to. Just what comes to mind, share in the chat, whatever's top of mind. I'm curious what comes across. And then I'm just going to keep going. But yeah, think about it. Think about what's kind of sticking with you as you go through this course. And so today we're going to be talking about communication. And the reason that I decided to go with communication as the second workshop is, to me, communication is the most fundamental skill of product management. I'd say much more than any other function, communication is essential for product managers to get good at. And if PMs, new PMs often ask me, what's like one thing I should work on to become a better PM? And I always point them to better communication. And the reason is partly just to like think through this. Okay, what do engineers spend most of their time doing? Just like share in the chat. What are engineers doing all day? What do they produce? What is their output? Coding. Lisa nailed it. Great. Okay, coding. Yeah, nailed it. Great. Okay, what do designers do all day? What is their output? Design. Great. Everyone got it. Paul, Melvin. Great. Okay, what do product managers do? I'm just going to tell you. They communicate. We get our work done through communication. Our code essentially is communicating, talking to people. And so, as Boz famously put it, he's a PM at Facebook, and he's got this blog post I think I linked in the pre-reading too. Communication is the job. That's basically our job, is to communicate in all the different ways. And I bet that in the homework assignment that you had, where you looked at the best PM that you know, I bet a lot of you kind of recognize that they're really good at communicating in many different ways. And the way that I learned this personally is early in my career when I started reporting to this guy. His name is Vlad. And I kind of transferred to him a few years into my career as a product manager. And Vlad was just a stickler for really clean documents, really succinct emails, really well thought through meetings and being prepared for meetings, and just like anything that involves communication. And the most classic feedback that he gave me as I was a PM was just like, maybe spend a little more time on this. Maybe spend a little more time on that document. Maybe spend a little more time preparing for that meeting. And I would say that him pushing me to level up my bar on communication and in general is probably the thing that helped me accelerate my career the fastest. Just that push to continue raising the bar. And that touches on a new kind of trait I want to seed that we're going to come back to often, that great PMs always keep a really high bar for everything they do, and also for everybody that they work with. So I just want to plant that thought, and we're going to keep coming back to this. Okay, so what we're going to learn today, I'm going to teach you the 5 modes of PM communication and just how to get better at all of them. I'm going to share the keys to just great general business communication, and then 2 strategies to improve your business communication in general. I'm going to teach you the Minto pyramid and the SDR framework. I'm going to teach you why you'd rather be a Jedi than a lawyer as a product manager. You're going to meet some new PMs, and we're going to do some Q&A. Okay, so let's start with, let me ask you, what are the modes of communication that PMs use? What are the different mediums of communication that come to mind where you're communicating? Emails, Slack, great. Meetings, yep. Docs, Clubhouse, nope. Okay, great. You guys nailed it. So there's 5 that are the most common. And Clubhouse is trending up. We'll see where that lands. It's email, documents, meetings, presentations, and then hallway conversations, slash in our new world, Slack. And a secret I just want to share with you as we start this journey is You don't actually have to be amazing at all of these things. If you're looking at this list and you're like, oh my God, I got to be an amazing presenter, emailer, document creator, you don't have to be. I was never amazing at running meetings. I was never that great a presenter. But what I got good at was email, documents, and just like informal conversations. And when I made a mistake in a meeting or gave a bad presentation, I was able to make it up with another form of communication. So my advice to you is double down on the skills you're already great at or good at, and then just patch up your liabilities, the things you're not amazing at. So let me ask you, just to kind of think about for a moment, of these 5 skills, which do you think you're strongest at? Just share in the chat, whatever comes to mind. Meetings, emails, presenting, cool. So it's interesting how everyone is very different. So that's just like an interesting learning, just seeing this, right? That like we all have very different strengths. And so my advice to you is whatever you said in that chat is double down on that and continue getting better at that. Okay, let me ask you, what is your weakest skill of these 5? Just share again in the chat, whatever comes to mind. Slack, emails, docs, interesting, also very varied. Okay, great. So my advice there is just keep it from being a liability. And we're going to talk about ways to get better at these things, but you just can't be terrible at presenting. You can't be terrible at email. So what you want to work on there is just like get to an okay place and just build off that. Okay, so just to like brainstorm out loud a little bit, say you're bad at presenting. What are just some ways you could patch up liabilities presenting? Joel, would you be interested in just sharing, unpacking your idea of practice? If you unmute yourself, if you're interested in just sharing your thoughts on practicing presenting.
Yeah, either doing like dry runs with a mentor or something or other peers, or even just stuff and like watching it back, kind of reflecting on ways you can improve there.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Let me find someone else to share their thoughts. How about Daniel Coolidge? Have a script. I like that. That's interesting. Is there something you can unpack there?
Yeah, it's really a lot easier in a virtual world where you can kind of just have your script up next to you as a fallback. But I find that writing out what I plan to say usually puts me in a place where I don't even need to then look back at my script
Love that.
when I'm actually there.
That's what I'm doing with this presentation. Okay, maybe one more. How about Lisa Vatcher? Recording yourself is a really cool idea. Is that something you've tried?
Yeah, I learned it from a couple of sales folks that I work with, that we had a huge pitch to Netflix that they would just relentlessly like record themselves and then kind of like pull a Beyonce that like go back and look at themselves like aggressively and critique their way of doing things. But in the end, their presentation ended up being one of the best I've ever seen. So if I have a big company-wide presentation coming up, I'll often a few days before kind of sit down and record myself even in this type of view through my camera and like watch I'm a big hand speaker. So stuff like that you can just watch yourself, and
love it.
It's a little bit rough at first, but you get used to it.
Yeah, I love that. I may or may not have done that with this presentation.
Yeah,
That's
exactly,
great advice.
right?
Great, thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Cool, so we're gonna keep going. Okay, so now let's get to our second lesson. So our first lesson was, don't feel like you have to be amazing at all the things that you're, all the more modes of communication. Double down on things you're already strong at and then patch up liabilities. Our second lesson is just how to get better at general business communication before we get into the 5 modes specifically. Okay, so let me ask you, what are just attributes of great business communication in a business setting? What do you think has to be true or is important when you're communicating in a business setting? Clear, concise. Okay, you guys are gonna get the 3 that I got. Okay, I think you got it. Great. Y'all are so over it. Okay, so these to me are the most important attributes of just generally being good at business communication: being clear, being convincing, and being concise. And just to make it a little more tactical, the way I would use this list here is when you're about to send an email or share a document or make a presentation, just go through this checklist and just ask yourself, can I be a little more clear? Can I be a little more convincing? Can I be a little more concise? And even to make it more practical, I would just make a little post-it like this and put it on your laptop and just kind of refer to it as you're sending an email, as you're writing a document. Like, can I just make this a little more convincing, a little more concise? And then that starts to build on itself. So So that's the tip. And now let's talk about just how to do this. That's just kind of a broad overview. Okay, so I'm going to share 2 frameworks that I find extremely useful to get better at business communication. The first is to assume your audience is drunk. Which sounds kind of funny and ridiculous, but it turns out this is an incredibly powerful lens to improve the way you communicate in business. And so why is this useful? So let me ask, how do drunk people respond when they're reading or listening to something? What do you think is going to come across? What are they like? How are they? Yeah, they fall asleep. Exactly. No attention span. They're like, what is going on? Distracted. Exactly. Okay. So that's exactly right. This is kind of like the way to think about a drunk person listening to where you're trying to pitch them. Exactly the way you guys described. Distracted, misunderstand stuff. They don't want to think. They think they know it all. They can't wait to move on to the next thing. And what's useful about this is exactly how busy people act. They're distracted. They're misunderstanding what you're trying to tell them. They don't want to think they know it all. So it turns out there's a really interesting lens because most of the people you work with are going to be really busy. So let's think about how to use that. How would you keep a drunk person engaged? Just share in the chat. What are some tactics you would use to keep someone that's drunk just like paying attention? Tell them a story, fried food, humor, fun content, changing tone. Great. Okay, these are great, even more than I had. So a few that I find useful, and these are also really great ideas. Keep it short, get to the point, make your ask really clear, make it interesting. Someone said humor, that's a really good method. Maybe make it visual. So let's look at an example. I'm going to show you 2 emails, and I want you to tell me which is easier to read. Here's the first, and then here's the second. Okay, so if you're saying the second, which most of you are, why is this easier to read? Can you share just what stands out about what makes this easier to read? Okay, Catherine, you say broken up. There's something you can add to that? What is it about it that kind of stands out? Catherine.
Yeah, I think
Infantiliano.
because, yeah, that was pretty good. Most people mess it up, so I'm impressed.
Infantiliano.
Infantilino. Well, maybe you weren't that close.
I effed it up.
So it's okay. So for me, like my eyes go immediately to the bottom line. Like there's one short sentence to read. And then if you want to, you can go into the context and it's broken down to like short sentences. So it's like read the short sentence and then you can move on. Read the short sentence where like
Exactly.
the first one is a giant blob. I'm like, where am I looking? I had to make sure I don't lose my spot. Like it's so much going on.
Exactly. Nailed it. Great. Thank you for sharing. That's exactly right. So kind of building on that, just things to think about when you're sending emails specifically, and this is going to apply to a lot of the business communication we talk about, is use formatting, bold, headings, white space, use structure to your advantage, white space, put important stuff up first, and then make it goal oriented. What are you trying to get out of the email? Make it super clear, because again, a busy / drunk person is not going to pay attention for long. And this is like the way I think about every email I send. This is what people are really going to read. Just like the email at the top, like Catherine said, and then like maybe one bullet point, and then they're just going to move on. So especially when it's an email you really want them to act on, I kind of imagine this is how people are reading your email. And this tweet by Matt actually summarized it really well. As he moved from a new PM to a senior PM, he kind of thought that like these long, detailed emails are what will work to convince people. And it turns out it's the opposite. It's the very targeted, short, simple emails that really make an impact. So that's something to keep in mind. And so again, just assume your audience is drunk, because that's how busy people act. Think about using these tactics when you're talking, when you're emailing, and generally when you're communicating in a business context. Short, point, use bold, white space, make it visual, that kind of thing. And then come back to this list that you might have in a post-it someday. What's one thing you can do to make it more clear, convincing, or concise? Okay, I'm going to pause there in case anyone has any questions, just to kind of break it up a little bit. And so I think Jonah's going to call on some folks.
Yeah, absolutely. Laura, can I get you to unmute yourself and share your question?
Yeah, so are we talking about the high bar question or the concise communication question?
Sorry.
They're both fantastic questions.
Okay. All right. So
pick
the first,
one.
yeah, the first question was, I don't come from an engineering background, and sometimes I feel like my engineers are definitely taking advantage of the working from home pace.
Mm.
So how can I try and set a high bar without having the context of knowing like what's a good output, what's not a good output?
That's a great question. We're going to talk about that in the execution workshop, but I would say one thing that I find works really well is to leverage the Eng manager. Basically, you want to build this really tight circle of you, the Eng manager, and the design manager, and then if you have like a data science and researcher manager too, where you're always on the same page and have the same priorities and the same sense of how things are going, and then work with through them. I find often works better than trying to push the engineer directly. And so in that case, if the Eng manager, if you have an Eng manager, do you have an Eng manager?
We did. They have
Oh, no.
left.
Okay,
We're trying to backfill.
Okay, classic. So that is, yeah, so that probably is part of the problem. Often the Eng manager can see what's going on. The engineer trusts them more. They can be more concrete about what's going on. So that's just like one tip. And then we're going to talk a lot more about this during the execution workshop.
Thank you so much, Laura. Alan Hoffman, can I have you unmute and ask your question?
Sure. It's basically, how do you communicate convincingly, concise, direct with an ask without, being abrasive or like people thinking that you're being a jerk?
So that's a really interesting question. I think there's just like, it's hard to answer broadly. I would say in business, people are more okay with you being direct, and they kind of, it's not like meant to be a social experience. So I think there's just a lot more assumption. If you're just like, here's the thing I want, they'll be okay with that. If you're finding that's not true, I don't know, like add an emoji, add a little smiley face, maybe add a little exclamation mark here and there. I think those kind of things help. But I don't know. I guess let me ask, do you find that this actually is an issue, or are you just kind of worried that it might be?
I found it an issue when starting at a new position without having built the trust first, right? It comes off as, who's this person and why are they being a jerk?
That's a really good point, that you kind of have to build trust to be like, no, here's what I need. So maybe just one thing is just like add in a little sentence at the top to add a little bit more context, and maybe push back a little bit on being very direct and clear, and then add a little bit of kind of personality to it just to start. That's a really good thought.
Fantastic. And why would we do one more? Melvin, do you mind unmuting yourself?
Yeah. So nowadays we kind of definitely use Slack a lot. And so there's kind of like a moving away from email a little bit more into Slack. How do you kind of differentiate between those two modes of communication?
Interesting. So I don't know if this is answering your question, but I find with Slack, you can be even more direct, just because people don't want to be like at Airbnb, we actually have this rule of no hello. You can't just be like, hello in a Slack and wait for them to get back to you and then tell them what you want. You want to get straight to the point and let the ask sit there, so that when they get there, they can actually do something with you. But otherwise, I don't actually have a great answer. I don't know if I haven't thought deeply about that. Just like how to translate some of these things to Slack, because we're using Slack a lot more. Let me think about that, actually. That's a good follow-up question.
Thanks.
Yeah, and if anyone has any suggestions for this, because this feels like a good one to crowdsource, just share in our Slack, I think, in questions would be a good place to answer these.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to follow the thread on workshop questions, and this is just a call out to remember, for any questions that are coming up, don't use the Zoom chat. Actually drop it in the Slack, because then you can actually kind of follow along with votes and comments. So yeah, Lenny, I'll pass it back over to you.
Awesome. All right. Next up, we're going to talk about the SCR framework, which stands for the Situation Complication Resolution Framework, and the Minto Pyramid. And where this comes from is it's a framework that this lady, Barbara Minto, developed. She's just this incredible person. She was the 20th woman admitted to Harvard Business School. She was the first female consultant. She worked at McKinsey for a long time. And she basically discovered that people are just really bad at creating a compelling case in business. They do it all backwards. And so what she developed is this framework that I'm gonna teach you, that tells you just how to tell a compelling story and how to tell a compelling case in business. And it turns out there's a very straightforward formula for doing this. And it actually is built on just the way to tell stories in general. So let me ask you all, just in the chat, share what's like a good way to tell a story? What is the flow? What are like the chunks of a good story when you think about it? Yeah, what do you think about? Beginning, middle, end, cool. Hero's journey, hook at the beginning, good start. Great. Okay, so this is great. So here's kind of like the arc. I found this image on the internet and it tells it really well. There's kind of these like 5 elements to it. There's the exposition, which is essentially the background on the characters in the world and what's happening in their lives. And then something goes wrong. And then you fix that thing that's going wrong with like a dragon and a sword a lot of times. And then you get past that, and then things start to calm down, and then happily ever after. This is essentially every story, every movie, every book. As an example, the Avengers. The Avengers start off being this awesome group of people that are getting together to save the world, and things are okay. And then this bad guy comes around and wants to kill half the people in the universe. And so they have to battle him, and there's this huge fight, and it's all happening, and then the fight's over. No spoilers. And then there's like an ending where things start to recover, and then there's the happily ever after. So basically, again, every movie, every story, every, I don't know, song maybe follows this journey. And if you simplify it a little bit, it turns into this framework that Barbara Minto kind of popularized. There's this situation, what is true today, and what is the state of the world? Then there's the complication, what went wrong and why do we have to do something? And then there's the resolution of how do we fix the complication? And to give a little more detail on what these steps are. Situation, what are just like the state of affairs today and things that no one's going to disagree with? Complication, what's changed that requires us to do something? And then resolution, how do we recommend we fix this complication? And so as an example, let's say we work at a company where growth has been steady for 20% month over month. That's where we are today. Complication, growth declined last month due to an increase in churn. Uh-oh. And then the resolution. We believe we need to reduce churn by investing in better onboarding. So it's just like a simple example of how to present what's going on at the company. And what's interesting about the framework versus a story is in the business context, you actually don't want to spend a lot of time on the beginning part. You don't want to actually be creating tension. You want to get to the solution as fast as possible. So this is more to scale of what you do in business, just to kind of set that context. And this is where the Minto pyramid comes in. And the Minto pyramid is essentially a framework to tell you how to present your conclusion and your recommendation. And the reason it's called the Minto pyramid is it's looks like a pyramid. What do you know? And the core thesis of it is you start with your recommendation. Instead of the way that most people like to, here we go. The way we like naturally want to tell a story and present a case is we want to start with, here's all the evidence and data and all the things we've learned. And then that's leading to our conclusion. It turns out it's a lot more powerful in business to start with, here's what I recommend we do. And then here's the supporting arguments that back up that claim. And then here's all the data and additional supporting arguments that back up that claim. So that's the thesis of the Minto pyramid. And the core idea is just like get to the punchline. Again, if you think about a drunk person / a busy person, they're just gonna like not pay attention to what you're telling them if you don't get to the conclusion. So you wanna avoid this. So let's look at an example of this in action. And let's look at Blockbuster. I just made this up based on what I know about Blockbuster. So here's before Minto. Here's like one way to present the case. Our business is slowing. We have all these stores, they're all down. We just launched the online market. 95% of our business comes through in-store, but only 5% online. Churn is starting to increase, but people seem to be switching to Netflix. Netflix is growing really fast. Our online order business is actually growing really fast also. And customers tell us they would use it if we presented to them. So our recommendation is we should invest heavily in the DVD online rental market. So compare that to the Minto version of this and the SCR framework. So you start with the situation. 95% of our business comes through in-store, 5% online. Complication. Our in-store rental business is slowing. Uh-oh. Our resolution. We believe that we should invest heavily in online DVD rentals. Supporting argument 1, supporting argument 2, supporting argument 3. It's a lot more powerful because as a busy / drunk person, you're just like, okay, I got it. I understand what you're saying. Here's another quick example. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but this is expanding on the growth one we looked at earlier. Just like growth is slowing. We're hearing from customers, they're confused about the product. We think onboarding is probably the way to go, so we should invest there. Versus situation, growth slowing, complication. Sorry, situations, growth has been steady. Complication, growth is slowing, we believe, because of churn. Resolution, but we believe we should invest in better onboarding. Supporting argument 1, 2, 3, data. So that's the general idea. And this kind of thing, it's easy. It's not going to really work if you just kind of listen to it happening. So we're going to do a little breakout session where you get to reinforce this with some of your fellow new product managers. And the instruction is very simple. Introduce yourselves, just kind of share where you're from and how long you've been a PM. And then I'm going to give you a before prompt, and then just like work together on creating an SCR format of this. And what you want to do is, what's the situation? What's the complication? And then what's the resolution? And I think Jonah put in the chat the instructions, which are here. And so have fun, and then we'll see you back in about 8 minutes.
Yeah, you'll see in the chat as well as the Slack channel, there's a link there that takes you to a Google Doc. It has the instructions as well as this slide. So click on that, load it up, and you'll start to get sent out to your rooms. And make sure you click join. When you see that dialog box, just click the big blue button. There we go.
I was waiting for you to say the CTA. I was going to jump in.
I know.
To be right, we should have.
early hiring challenges, eh?
Yeah, startup hiring. You never know what you're going to get. Just like a box of chocolates.
Yeah, that's, I'm sure you ran into that a couple times now.
Yeah, that was the only mistake we made at the entire time at the startup. One mistake.
One mistake, yeah. Perfect. Lucky.
Should we get started, or are we more people filtering in?
Still a few more people filtering in. They're just wrapping up their SCR breakouts. It looks like we're about halfway full at this point.
Okay, welcome back, folks. As you're joining, your fellow friends are still coming back.
Yeah. It's always that group at the back that's a little bit slow, taking their time.
Oh, it's the back of the bus group. Oh, I see.
Yeah.
They're just like...
Or they're having the most fun. Trying to get every
well,
second.
yeah.
Probably the Four Loco squad over there.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
A little bit of a rivalry going on, I'm sure.
Oh man. We're mixing up the squads in these groups. Okay,
all right,
cool.
We're good looking good.
Awesome. Welcome back, everyone. Hope that was useful and hope you enjoyed your chat. Who would like to share a takeaway from their chat? Just kind of let me know in the chat and I'll call on you if you're interested. If there's anything you took away, anything that stands out of like, oh, that's kind of cool. Oh, Catherine, do you want to jump in again? Infantolino.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Getting worse.
I was just saying, I thought it was, I wrote down situation, conflict, resolution, and I realized that C is not for conflict. So that was probably the quickest takeaway I had at the beginning of the session.
Cool. Yeah, it's like close enough. Something's wrong.
Yeah.
Cool. How about Shoaib? Would you like to share?
Yeah, so for like it's pronounced Shoaib, like it's a complicated word. I get it. But what I realized was like if I was working against a timer, like I am forced to be more succinct. And I mean, that could be a hack. Like, I don't know, like it just makes sure that I have the most important points down.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. That's actually one of the tips, one of the ways to use this framework. And I have a slide coming up about this is like knowing these three things, you could just like whip out a doc quickly by just giving you a little bit of a framework to start writing things out. So that's awesome. That's a great learning. Cool. Thanks for sharing. Okay, we're going to keep going. Someone in the chat mentioned this as I was talking about it. So this is an important point. is this SDR framework can actually be flipped a little bit, and you can put the R at the top. And the reason you do this sometimes, where you basically take the Minto pyramid and move it up even further, where you get straight to the answer before even setting context. You do this if the audience doesn't really need to be convinced. If they're just like, okay, just tell me what you want to do, you can go resolution first. And then, okay, here's the situation and here's the problem. So this can play around. And there, in one of the pre-readings, you can flip this around in many ways, but I'd say these are the two most common approaches. So keep that in the back of your back pocket. And then the way Shoaib pointed out, this is the way that I would use this, is just like anytime you're starting a new document where you're trying to convince someone of something, whether it's a presentation or a document, just like write these 3 things in that doc and then just start fleshing them out, and it'll create a really cool structure to start thinking through how to pitch this thing. Okay, so just a quick recap of the 2 frameworks that we just talked about around just general business communication. Just think of your audience as drunk and use that lens when you're sending something, writing a document, communicating in a presentation, and then this SDR framework and the Minto pyramid. Okay, so now we're going to move to the 5 modes of PM communication, and I'm going to give you a bunch of tactics to get better at each of these. So all of these touch on the kind of a seed I planted last time, that you want to start creating this aura of yourself that you've just got this. And communicating is a really big part of that, because people assume the way you communicate is the way you think. So the more time and effort you put into communicating well, the more people are going to understand that you're thinking really clearly. So this is really important around this aura of I got this. And again, just remembering this lesson from Vlad, just spend more time on this. That's kind of a recurring theme you're going to find through this to get better at this stuff. Okay, so there's going to be 5 lessons on each of these things. So this is the 3rd. And our 3rd lesson is about email. Who here emails often? Everybody. You don't even have to tell me. Email is very popular mode of communication of product managers. So we're going to spend time here. Okay, so the first tactic is something you've already seen, and I'm just going to put a name to it now. The framework is essentially a way to structure your emails where they come across a lot more clearly. And it actually comes from the military, where, as you can imagine, it's really important to be clear and really important to be convincing and precise. And so it's a really good forcing function to learn how to communicate clearly, concisely, and convincingly. And the way this works is there's essentially 3 parts. There's the subject line, which is just like what is the point of this email? And you want to be very direct. Then there's the bluff, the bottom line up front. Just tell the person, here's what I want. Don't bury it. And an interesting thing you'll start noticing as we go through a lot of this, and in general, is just the Minto pyramid comes up again and again and again in many forms. And this is exactly that again. At the top is here's what I want, and then it's the additional context. So you put the bottom line up front, and then it's additional context, skimmable bullet points. So it's really easy. So my advice to you is try sending emails like this week. Try to do like most of your emails in this format. It doesn't always apply, but take this as a to-do. Just like send your next email in this format and see how it goes. And what I often find is that other people start to do it the same way, and it starts to snowball. And even if it doesn't, you could always have that in your back pocket if you're emailing an exec or someone and you need to be really clear. Okay, so for our next tactic, let me ask, just with an emoji reaction, just to give me a thumbs up if you regularly reread your email before you send it. I'm just curious how often this happens. Okay, so a lot of you do, but a lot of you don't. And so my advice to you is to do this. For me personally, this was one of the biggest improvements to my emailing technique, is forcing myself to read my email again. Naturally, I just like don't want to read anything I write. I just want to move on. But I find every time I do that, there's just like typos and I think I could improve. I could be clearer, I could cut stuff. So what I would do is force yourself to read your email before you send it at least once. And here's just like things to look for. Are there typos? Is my tone right? I forget who asked that question, but just thinking about it, does this feel like a good tone? And then again, coming back to the general advice, can it be more clear? Can it be more convincing? Can it be more concise? And on that note, if you also don't already have Grammarly, I would highly recommend downloading Grammarly. I'm not an investor. I just love the product and it just makes everything better. It'll catch all your typos and grammar issues and just make you sound smarter. And it's free. So highly recommend. And this again comes back to one of our traits of great product managers is just keep the bar high for everything that you're doing and everyone around you. And just like catching issues and making your emails clear is an example of that. Okay, tactic 3 in getting better at email is something I personally could not live without. And the technique is to keep a list of things you're waiting for from other people. Because if you think back to a lot of our job, it's waiting for engineers to get back on something, waiting for designers to get your design, waiting for your manager to make a decision. And the worst way of approaching that is to keep it in your head and remember that you have to like, oh, I have to make sure they're doing that and this and that. And so what I do, I just keep this in my notebook. So I take notes and to-dos in a notebook. If you use a digital format, you could use it there. And the key is just like make a little list somewhere of just like who you're waiting for on things. So in this case, waiting for Michelle to get back on designs, waiting for Laura to get me back copy, waiting for Joe for an agenda. And it's really simple, but if you do this and you get this out of your head, it just creates this relief that you don't have to remember all the things that are on your plate. And somebody in the chat mentioned this comes from getting things done, and that's exactly right. There's this productivity framework David Allen came up with, and one of the elements is this idea of waiting fors. And I forgot all the other things, but this is the thing that stuck with me, and it's incredibly important. And the way I do this is I write it, and then I cross them out when they do the thing, and then I just like recreate it every day or two when it gets too messy. So this is one of your homework assignments, I think, to start this. Yes, it is. One of your homework assignments is going to be to try to do this and see how it goes. Also, you can use Google Snooze as a part of this. If there's like an email you're going to send to your boss to get an okay on something, just like snooze it for the next 48 hours, and then it'll come back. And that'll be a really good way to just remember, oh yeah, I got that thing. So those are two ways to do it. And again, this is one of the more important elements of creating this aura that you got this, because it'll keep you from dropping the ball and dropping things that you forgot about. And just, it'll keep you on top of threads that you have to be on top of. So quick recap of email skills. Military style, reread it at least once. It's like, sounds very simple, but it's really effective. And then track waiting fors. Okay, lesson 4. Better documents. Who here writes documents? Everybody. So let's talk about how to write better documents. Okay, so tactic 1, again, this is coming back to something we already learned. The best way to get better at documents is to follow the structure when you're creating documents: situation, complication, resolution. So I'm actually going to share you on a bunch of templates that, if you look closely, they're essentially the SCR flow in a form. So this is the simplest thing you could just do, is build on that skill we just worked on and bring it to the documents you create, and it'll just make your life a lot easier. Okay, tactic 2. Let me ask y'all, who here saves copies of great documents that they come across? Just give me an emoji reaction if you keep kind of like a folder of your best documents, emails, presentations. Cool. All right, people are giving +1s, -1s. I don't know what that means. Great. So a lot of people do this. So if you don't do this, I highly recommend you do this. It's called a swipe file. And all it is just a place just to dump stuff that just feels compelling or inspiring or something that you just want to like learn from in the future. And this is the kind of thing that's hard to do quickly, but it's really, really easy to do over time, so that when you need it, it's there for you. And the way you use this, there's 2 ways. One is when you're working on a doc or presentation, you could just go there and just be inspired. Oh yeah, oh wow, look how they started that presentation. Look like how they made it more interactive. And it gives you inspiration. And then 2 is it creates templates that, it gives you the ability to create your own templates from these awesome examples. So all the templates I'm sharing with you are just based on exactly this. It's me collecting all these awesome documents and then just sussing out, here's like a structure that works really well. And you'll find in your company you have different needs, and so you could adjust the templates to be your own style. And so here's an example of a strategy template I'm going to share with you after this workshop that came out of looking at just a bunch of strategy documents. Again, roughly following the Minto pyramid. Okay, tactic 3. And this comes back to our lesson of just spending, oh no, I haven't taught you this one yet. Okay, so first, tactic 3, just like spending more time on the document. It's like a dumb tactic, but it's incredibly powerful. And I just want to make it concrete. So I'm just going to say spend 25% more time on a document than you normally would. To me, this was one of the other biggest lessons of what makes PMs great is they just spend more time. They just find time to make the document better. And they just continue refining. And that's one of the other attributes of great PMs is they just spend more time on things than anybody else. It connects to what basically what Vlad taught me back in the days, just spend more time on this thing. People are going to judge you based on the quality of the document and email and presentation that you present, not on like you didn't have time to do it well, or you just like gave them a simple copy before it was done. They're going to judge based on the end result. So as an example of that, imagine being an exec and getting a doc like this from you and being like, okay, I guess it's kind of coming together and I'm not sure what I'm going to do here, versus a document that's no comments, nothing's crossed out, everything's done. It's a lot more effective and powerful. It makes it feel like that PM's got it figured out. They really thought it through. They've spent the time to do it right. So even simple things, just going back one slide, is like, just like knock out comments when you're sharing a document with people that are important, because it just feels a lot more complete and done. And this is the kind of stuff that's like minor, but really makes a dent. And so just like ways to refine the document, just some ideas for you. Get started early. This comes back to a habit we talked about last time, is to look around corners. You want to get started early on a document so you have time to work on it. You want to get feedback early, just like cheat by leveraging other people's brains to refine it and refine. Always look for one thing you could do better, resolve comments, formatting, heading, and just like cut stuff. Great. Okay. So I guess on this topic, what are other ways you could maybe refine a document just to make it better and better and better? What comes to mind? Just like other ways to continue making a document better. Just share in the chat. Oh, make it searchable. That's awesome. Interesting. Visuals. Those are great ideas. Formatting. Exactly. Ruthless editing. Great. Okay. That's exactly right. You guys got it. Less filler words, headings. Exactly. Great. And again, this all just comes back to creating this aura that like, you've got this, like you've thought it through. You've really put in the time. You aren't like waiting for all these loose threads to happen. So that's just something to always think about. Okay. So that's a recap on documents. Use this framework that we talked about to structure them out. Start the swipe file to create a set of inspiration that will inform your own templates and documents in the future. And then just spend more time, 25% more time. If you're like, I'm done with this document, just spend 25% more time making it a little bit better. That's my advice there. Okay, let me pause here for questions if anyone has any questions.
Great. Yeah, we have a couple great questions, a couple high-level questions that I definitely want to tackle towards the end of the presentation, but just to keep things kind of hyper-specific on what we're talking about right now, Emily Fong, do you mind unmuting yourself and asking your question?
Yeah, my question is, if you're explicitly asking for feedback on a document, are other comments being available? Is that informative or useful for reviewers, or does that often turn out to be distracting?
It's a really good question. It's always this balancing act where sometimes you want people to see other people's documents. Sometimes it comes across as like, they don't really know what they're doing, or I'm influenced by their comments. But I'd say if they're not the person you're going to deliver this to, totally fine if there's comments and they're all working on it collaboratively. Like if it's your engineering team or if it's your leads team, I think it's fine. Like comments in there, it's all good. You're all like working together often to present it to somebody else. So I would divide the world almost that way. Some people totally fine. The rest, don't let them see the sausage making. Let's just do one more question, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Clark, do you mind unmuting and jumping in here?
Sure. Yeah. I think this is kind of related to what we've been talking about, but I just often I'm not quite sure the right time to start involving other people, even if the document's clean. So are there any tricks to identify the right time to involve others or get others started?
We had a chat about this in the Slack, and my feeling is you always want to first share your perspective and have a kind of a straw person argument so that people can like argue against or build on or something like that versus like, here's a clean document, let's all throw our ideas in there. So it's kind of like a vague answer, but I would always lean towards having a point of view and have something for people to comment on versus just a blank slate. Cool. Thanks for that question. These are great questions. Okay, so I'm going to keep going and then we'll have more time at the end for questions. Okay, so our fifth lesson is meetings. Who goes to meetings, everybody? So let's talk about a couple ways just to have better meetings. Let me ask you all, what makes a bad meeting? What comes to mind? So many reasons. Aimless, yeah, no agenda, great. Could have been not a meeting, no agenda, unstructured, amazing, great. Okay, here's all the reasons you guys are naming and more. So many ways a meeting can be bad. Okay, so I'm gonna give you 2 ways to avoid having bad meetings, especially when you're leading the meeting. The first is to always work backwards from the goal you're trying to achieve in the meeting. And there's essentially 5 things I would think about whenever you organize a meeting. I would think about, what is the goal of this meeting? What do I want to get out of it as a product manager? And then, okay, to do that, what is the agenda that I want to have in the meeting? What should people be reading ahead of the meeting to make the meeting productive? Who's going to own the meeting? Is it me? Who's going to just run this thing? And then also very importantly is who needs to be there? And then who shouldn't be there? Who's going to cause problems for getting us on a decision or just like is unnecessary? And a really simple way of using this tactic is, here's a little template I'll send you in the post workshop reading is, you could just, in every invite you send, just like, here's the goal of the meeting. Here's our agenda. Here's who's going to talk and for how long. Here's some pre-reading. And that, just like this little thing, makes a big dent in the quality of the meetings you're going to have. And it's a tiny little change, but really makes a dent because it forces you to think about it. Okay, what is the goal of this meeting? Oh, maybe there's not a clear goal. Let's fix that. And then kind of on the flip side is when you're going to a meeting that doesn't have this kind of thing, I would just encourage the owner to create at least a goal. And then, hey, what's the agenda? And is there anything I could read? So you could use this in 2 different ways. And I'll send you this in the post reading or in the post workshop reading. Okay. And this connects to another habit. And I'm gonna come back and kind of build these traits of what great PMs are as we go through this course. And so we talked about this one already last time, that great PMs are always looking for ways to move the team forward. And meetings are one of the better ways to do that because you have everyone in a room, you can make a decision. So you want to use that meeting well. Okay, our second tactic. Let me ask you a question. Okay, when you're asking a witness a question on the stand, what's like the #1 rule that lawyers learn about the kind of questions they should ask? Don't ask leading, okay. Know the answer. Okay, Sam, I think was the first person, but maybe someone else got it. Exactly. That you don't want to ask a question that you don't already know the answer to. Classic lawyer 101. Great. And so my second piece of advice to you is to use this tactic that I call the meeting before the meeting. And what this is all about is syncing with people that are important stakeholders in the meeting ahead of time and getting them to, 1, understanding where they're going to be in the meeting, and 2, trying to get them on your side. It doesn't have to be a side, but just like seeing the things the way you see them before the meeting. You basically want to avoid having this like, here's like what you want to avoid. You want to not be the lawyer where you're just like arguing your case in the meeting and hoping to change everybody's mind. What you actually want to be is more of a Jedi, where you're working behind the scenes to get everybody to see the world that you see, so that when you go into this really important meeting, everyone's already agreed as much as they can be. This is much more important in really important meetings. You don't have to do this every time, but as you level up as a PM, you'll find that other PMs are doing this and other leaders do this often, and it'll help you be a lot more successful in meetings. So you're not going into a meeting unprepared for what's going to happen. And again, this takes time. This is just like another one of those things that PMs have to do to be successful, but it's extremely powerful and important if you want to be really successful in meetings. So basically just think more like a Jedi, less like a lawyer when you're trying to be a product manager, and then just put in the time to do these things because it really works. Okay, so quick recap on meetings. Work backwards from the outcome, and then think like a Jedi. How do you get people on your side without being in this tension-filled, unpredictable environment as much as you can? Have these kind of meetings before the meeting. Okay, so 2 more. We're going to talk about presentations, and then we're going to talk about hallway conversations. These are going to be actually pretty quick. So presentations, there's like so much I could talk about to get better presentations. It's like its own workshop. So I'm not going to try to do that. And I'm just going to give you one thing that you could do to have better presentations. And it's essentially how to sequence the way you present. What is a good sequence to present something you're trying to convince people of? And here's what I would recommend. And what I want this to be is just like whenever you're starting your presentation, just like create these 7 slides and then flesh them out. So you want to start with, what is the goal of this meeting? Hey, everyone, your goal today is XYZ. Then you want to align on the problem you're solving. Often you're presenting because you're trying to solve a problem. So the next slide is, okay, just a reminder, here's the problem we're solving and we're trying to address. So that's slide 2. Slide 3 is Minto pyramid style. Okay, here's what we're going to recommend. And then you talk about, here's the process we went through to get to this conclusion. Here's the evidence and data and what we learned on our journey. And then you get to, here's the ask, whether it's, are we good to go? Do you have any feedback? That kind of thing. Often you have an ask in a meeting, and so you want to make sure you get to that. And then just next steps. Okay, what's next? Great, we're going to follow up on this resource. We're going to follow up on this hire and moving this engineer here to there, that kind of thing. So it's just like a really simple sequence of how to present a convincing presentation. And again, it builds on Barbara Minto's philosophy and thinking. So again, you're going to find this come up again and again in business. Okay, our final lesson is really simple and quick. Just a tip for just like hallway conversations and Slack check-ins. And my advice to you is just like really simple, just do them. A lot of PMs find themselves just like sitting in their cubicle / seat and just working on things on their own with just going to meetings, going to stand-ups, and not really interacting as a human being with people on their team. And my advice to you is find opportunities to just like check in with your team. When you're back in an office, if you're going back to an office, it's just walking around. Just find like 15 minutes in a day to walk around and just check in. Hey, how are you doing? And I'll actually give you a few things you could check in on. It's like really casual, but and with Slack, it's like just like Slack, each person in your team may be like, I don't know, once a week, and just like ask them, hey, how you doing? How's things going? Is there anything slowing you down? Anything I could help you with? And the reason this is important is, and this is a new concept I want to introduce, is great PMs are always looking for ways to build trust and strengthen their relationships with their team and stakeholders, because the way you collaborate and influence others is through trust and relationships. And sometimes you have to dip into that and use it to get something done. And so when you need that, you need to have built it up ahead of time. And these are just little ways to build those things. And so here's just like, things you could check in on. How are you doing? Anything slowing you down? How's that project feeling? Are you excited for the all hands that's coming up? Any questions about the strategy? Just like really simple things that just create a connection. So, so that's the workshop. That's our tactics and lessons and frameworks and all the things. Let me do a quick recap, and then I'm going to share a couple fun new surprises and things. Okay, so recap plus one more thing. Okay, so we learned communication is the job. We learned the 5 modes of communication that PMs go through. The secret that you don't have to be amazing at all of these. Don't stress out that you have to be like the best presenter or the best meeting giver, runner. Double down your strengths, patch up your liabilities. Always think, what's one thing I could do to be more convincing and clear and concise? Assume your audience is drunk / busy. Ways that you could be more convincing and clear and concise. Keep it short, make it visual, keep it interesting. We learned about the SER framework and the Minto pyramid, and you're going to have homework actually to practice this a little bit more. How to get better email, military style, reread, track waiting fors. Get better at documents, SER framework, Minto pyramid. Start the swipe file, really easy to start, hard to do when you need it in the future. And then just spend 25% more time on those documents. Get better at meetings. Work backwards from the outcome you want to achieve in the meeting. So think about the goal, think about the agenda, who's in charge, and who should be there. And then channel your inner Jedi. And then for presentations, try using this flow next time you're giving a presentation and see how that feels. And just do these informal chats with your team as often as you can. And again, a lot of this comes back to great PMs are always looking for opportunities to build trust and relationships with their team members and stakeholders. And I'm starting to build this list that we're going to come back to over and over of just attributes of great PMs. And I'll share this in the Slack, and we're just going to build this over time. And so just a heads up of our next workshop is going to be about collaboration and influence, the second most important skill of product managers that builds on communication. And we're going to learn about this and how this relates to collaboration. Stay tuned for that. So let me ask you all before we get into Q&A, what's one thing that you're going to take away from today's workshop? Just share in the chat and we'll see what sticks with people. Great. SCR, spend more time, or email Minto. Great. Okay. I love it. Great. Thank you for sharing. Let me give you a preview of the homework. So we're going to have 4 things that I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to give you another example of a Minto exercise. So try to do it again in a different context. Just spend some time thinking about which of these 5 modes you want to double down on, and that you want to get better at. Spend some time analyzing great emails and documents to see what else comes out of them. And then I want you to start a waiting for list if you don't already do this, and just see how that feels. Okay, so a little announcement. We're gonna have 2 more amazing special guests join us during this course. So Jason Gibson Biddle, who has the most amazing name, is gonna join us to talk about data and how to use data with for product managers. It's something I had to cut from this course because I didn't have time to do it. So I'm really happy Gibson agreed to do this, and it's gonna be like an hour lecture that he's gonna give. I'm not even gonna be talking to him, he's just gonna run it. And then Brandon Chu, who I've personally never met, but I just reached out to him and asked him to join, and he's very excited. So we're going to do an AMA talking about collaboration and influence and how he's learned how to get better at that. And then also Jackie Varos joining us in the very last workshop. She's going to be part of the workshop actually at the tail end. So that's coming up. And then also if you didn't catch the Shreyas chat yesterday, there's a recording that you can find in your student portal. And don't forget to fill out your feedback survey. And then we're going to move to Q&A. I think we have about 5 minutes.
Perfect. Yeah, why don't we run through a few questions here. I'd love to start off. Josh, can I invite you to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, sure thing. So my question is, how do you check in with your team without feeling like you're nagging them or micromanaging?
Yeah, that is a very delicate balance. So I think the key is to have like a genuine, no agenda interaction where you're not like internally even trying to check in on how things are going in terms of timelines and progress and things like that. It's like you just need to feel like it's coming from, I wonder how this human being is doing, not, I wonder how that project is going. So that's just like a general idea. And then I think if you just feel like it's too naggy, and it just feels like they think that you're just checking in and wondering how the project is going, just like maybe just stop it and find other opportunities. Maybe like in a Zoom, find a way to chat with them informally. Yeah, so it's a very delicate dance.
Yeah, and I think certain people
right
expect the expectation. So some people you say, hey, how are you? Go into a conversation and that's fine with them. And other engineers just want you to go straight to the point and just say what's up.
That's a really good point. So that's a really good learning. Just like don't do this with everyone if they're just like gonna assume you have some agenda behind what you're asking. That's a really good thought. Thanks for sharing that.
Thanks, Josh. Kate Selmer, can I get you to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah. So I really like the point about trying to spend more time on documents, but I feel like I often have the opposite problem where I get like kind of like nervous about sending something, like writing something, and I spend too much time on it, and then like I end up being delayed, and I would have been like way better off just like getting feedback earlier. So I'm kind of curious about how you take care of that balance of making sure you're not, sending someone a pile of like slush, but like also making sure it's like you're not spending too much time on it.
It's such a danger and such a slippery slope. So I think what I find useful is share it early with kind of like your trusted group and get feedback ASAP from folks that aren't going to necessarily judge it, assuming it's going to go to someone else. So I do that as soon as I can. As soon as I'm like, okay, I think I've got a general idea and I've kind of thought it through, then share it. And then they'll help. And then I use that as a kind of like a litmus test, that's the word, to tell me how far off I am based on the feedback that they give me. So I think it's share early to a small group, and then take the time to make it awesome when you share it wider. That's a general piece of advice. And I guess I'll add, if you just find you're often taking too long, just like push yourself to get it out earlier, because that's just a personal trait that I would just recognize and share earlier for that reason.
And one question that has come up a couple times around hallway conversations. Daniel, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Sure. So I thrive with the hallway conversation type of communication, but it's not possible in a remote world. So I'm kind of curious ways of mimicking that.
Yeah. So I haven't been working remotely like with the team. So I think all of you actually have a lot more experience dealing with remote work as a PM. And something I actually want to try to figure out is how to crowdsource insights you all have learned about how to do this well. So maybe this is another one we either take to Slack, or we maybe do like somebody organizes a little discussion to share what folks are finding valuable here. Because I honestly don't have great answers because I haven't experienced it. And it's really hard. Yeah, I feel like the PM job just got a lot harder working remotely. So
Perfect.
Yeah, not a satisfying answer, but let's find a way to get you answers.
Yeah.
Joan, is the best way for people to comment in the Slack question thread?
Yeah, why don't we open that Slack thread? There's already some comments already going into it in the workshop questions. So, and that's a great topic just to bring into your squads this week too. Right on.
And then maybe I'll synthesize it into somebody suggested newsletter post. Maybe I'll do that. Cool. Are we good?
We have one more question.
Okay, cool.
Coming in from Kieran. Do you want to unmute yourself?
Hey there. So I often find, brevity is super valid to consider when you're writing documents, clear, crystal clear, etc. But there's a point where you're just artificially diluting the level of depth and context you can get into. And I think I love the point of looking around corners and anticipating things. So it's a pain to not be able to write down some of those things you're seeing around the corner for the sake of just artificially making your brief shorter. And so have you found a way to kind of thread that needle?
Yeah. So what I do is I just have a little line break where it's the end of the official one pager, and then it's all the other stuff like an FAQ or additional thinking or like an appendix almost. That's one way to solve it. Amazon has a 6-pager template that they use, and they even have this whole FAQ section at the end of just all the other stuff that people might be wondering. So that's a really cool solution. Just add it to the bottom, make it clear. Don't pay attention to this if you don't care. Does that help? Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you everyone for your questions.
Cool. All right. I think we're done. Awesome. Well, have a great evening / morning wherever you are. And then I'll see you next Tuesday. And we're going to be talking about collaboration influence. So thank you all for joining, and I'll see you on Slack. Bye, everyone.
See you, everyone.
Thanks,
so
Lenny.
much.
Thanks, all.
Thanks, Lenny. Later.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Cheers.
Thanks, bye.
Bye-bye.
This is fun. This is bye-bye routine we got going here. It's like a basketball high five thing at the end of a game.
Yeah, it's great. I like it. Just the chat waterfall too.
Oh yeah. Bye, everyone. Oh, Avery's going to be in a Darsh the last two.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Avery. What's up,
Hey.
Avery? Welcome to the end. Where are you based, Avery?
I'm in Berkeley. I live at
Oh.
the snack house where SnackPass was started.
Oh, wow. Oh, Snack Pass. I love those guys.
Yeah. Kevin's a joy.
What was that?
It's a joy working with Kevin and the
Oh, you work at Snack Pass.
Yeah. I'm the only product manager in addition to Kevin.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So cool. I'm thinking about moving to Berkeley maybe, so that would be
Oh.
fun.
It's beautiful. I mean, just flowers everywhere when you're walking along the streets. You know,
that sounds dreamy. Oh man. Okay, I think we're gonna have to let Jonah go because he's staying up for us.
Perfect.
All good. All